On the evening of September 28, 2025, at precisely 6:34 p.m., every screen inside Russia's Western Border Integrated Air Defense Command centers turned crimson at once. It was not a typical alert. What appeared on those displays was the start of a nightmare carefully engineered to unfold in multiple acts. Kursk, Belgorod, and Bryansk, the three critical oblasts along the western frontier, were all struck simultaneously by swarms of incoming aerial threats. Two American-made M142 HIMARS batteries, positioned just north of Kharkiv behind the cover of civilian settlements, had silently taken up firing positions. What followed was not a conventional barrage. Dozens of airborne objects began pushing into Russian airspace from Ukrainian territory. They weren't crude FPV drones. They were advanced UJ-26 Bobur ER and Shila 400 kamikaze drones, long-range attack models each capable of carrying warheads weighing 30 to 50 kilograms. Russia's frontline defense responded instantly. Panzer S-1S and Tor-M2 batteries opened fire, unleashing tracer lines across the darkening sky. Missile trails and artillery bursts lit up the atmosphere as operators and command centers marked successful intercepts one after another. Each destroyed drone was logged as a win. For a moment, the picture was reassuring. The defenses worked. The airspace looked secure. Russia's best systems seemed to have proven themselves once again. But that sense of security was exactly what Ukraine wanted. It was the illusion before the reveal, the bait before the trap. While Russian crews were fixated on the chaos above, hunting drones in a glowing web of radar signals and missile locks, the true threat was preparing to strike, hidden behind that electronic noise. Suddenly, 6 trails appeared on the Belgorod radar screens. They were not drones, and they weren't flying laterally. They were falling, plunging vertically from the upper layers of the atmosphere at more than 2.5 times the speed of sound. For a split second, silence gripped the room. This was not the usual. This was escalation. The Russian commander gave the order. The S-400 battery, held back until then as the ace of the defense, powered up its Gravestone 92 N6E radar, emitting its massive signature into the night sky. Within seconds, 48 N6DM interceptor missiles were fired at Mach 6, chasing the 6 targets streaking downward. Explosions bloomed in the stratosphere. Then came the triumphant call from the operator. All targets destroyed. Direct hits. The command room erupted in cheers. Russia, they believed, had defeated the most complex air assault in its history. But the truth was very different. Hundreds of kilometers away, in a fortified Ukrainian bunker, officers monitoring the operation were not disappointed. They were thrilled, because in their minds, this was not a failure, it was success. The operation had actually begun hours earlier, when Ukraine launched a massive swarm of UAVs toward 8 Russian regions: Kursk, Bryansk, Belgorod, Shila, Yaroslav, Rostov, Novgorod, and Samara, one of the largest and most synchronized drone strikes of the war. This barrage was never meant to cause direct destruction. Its purpose was to sow confusion, force Russia to spread its defenses, and deplete valuable ammunition. Above all, it was designed to get Russia's most prized systems, its S-400s, to reveal themselves. The real target was not those initial HIMARS rockets or the drone swarms. It was in Belgorod, only 90 kilometers from Kharkiv, and it was no ordinary facility. Open source intelligence and satellite imagery had long confirmed it. The Belgorodskaya TTS thermal power plant. This was no mere civilian installation. It was the energy hub that powered Russia's 20th Guard Combined Arms Army, one of the Kremlin's key strike formations operating in eastern Ukraine. The plant sustained radars, command systems, and the critical railway networks that carried ammunition and reinforcements to the front. It was, in military terms, a center of gravity. Ukrainian intelligence knew it would be heavily guarded, and that was the point. The plan was to overload the defenses until a single lethal window appeared. At the exact moment Russian crews were celebrating their successful intercepts, Ukrainian officers were already issuing their next order: send the second salvo, fire at will. The first wave of HIMARS rockets, valued at roughly $170,000 each, had never been meant to survive. They were high-speed decoys, some of the most expensive bait ever used in combat. Their sole purpose was to force the S-400 to light up, expose its position, and broadcast its electronic fingerprint. That information was instantly transmitted to a second HIMARS battery lying in wait. Alongside it, Heavy kamikaze drones continued their advance toward the now compromised system. The real hunt was beginning. At 6:46 p.m., 6 more GMLRS rockets streaked into the sky, this time aimed not at decoy coordinates but at the thermal power plant itself. Inside the Russian command center, the mood flipped from victory to horror as new trajectories appeared on their screens. The S-400 attempted to re-engage, but the system was in its short blind spot period, recalibrating after its earlier engagement. Tor and Panzer units were still tied up with drone swarms. And at that very moment, a Ukrainian UJ-26 drone broke cover and dug directly into the S-400's radar command vehicle. The impact silenced the gravestone radar for crucial seconds, the very seconds when Russia needed it most. By 6:47 p.m., the second wave was already over the border. With no functioning radar, there was nothing left to stop them. The 6 HIMARS rockets slammed into Belgorod transformer station, the heart of the region's energy grid. The explosions ripped through steel and copper, sending arcs of electricity bright enough to turn night into day. In an instant, the lights went out. But this was not just a blackout. The strike severed the lifeline of Russia's regional war machine. The radars guiding S-300 and S-400 units went dark. Communication shelters lost power. The electrified railway network that moved ammunition and fuel across Belgorod halted. Pumps, water systems, and internet lines collapsed. The domino effect was immediate and merciless. Within minutes, a city of 500,000 was paralyzed. Elevators stopped with people trapped inside. Traffic froze at intersections. Shops could no longer process electronic payments. Heating and water systems failed. Cell towers went offline. Crowds swarmed gas stations and supermarkets. Panic spread like wildfire. At 7:07 p.m., the governor of Belgorod was forced to admit the truth. There was an attack on our critical infrastructure facility and serious power outages are occurring. His words shattered the defense ministry's triumphant claims of shooting down hundreds of drones. Russian state media tried to frame the disaster as a transformer accident, but satellite data from NASA's firm system showed a massive fire, while videos from civilians on the ground confirmed the devastation. Ukraine's operation was a symphony of deception and precision. Over 230 drones had been used not to destroy but to distract. Their job was to pave the way for a handful of HIMARS rockets to reach their true target. And they succeeded. The consequences were staggering. The Belgorod attack did more than knock out a power plant. It shattered Russia's military doctrine. For decades, Moscow had operated under the belief that war would be fought beyond its own borders. That illusion died in September 2025. With long-range precision weapons, Ukraine proved that the Russian heartland was no longer safe. The front line was everywhere. The strike's effect on morale was catastrophic. Soldiers at the front realized that while they fought in trenches, their support bases far behind them could vanish in an instant. Generals found themselves cut off, communication severed, screens dark. They were thrust back into a pre-digital battlefield. Industry also collapsed. Belgorod and surrounding regions have been converted into hubs of war production. Factories churning out ammunition, parts, and repairs. When the grid failed, those assembly lines stopped cold. Robotic arms froze mid-motion. CNC machines fell silent. Each hour of blackout meant fewer shells, fewer vehicles repaired, fewer supplies delivered. The railways, Russia's logistical backbone, were hit hardest. Electrified lines through Belgorod connected Russia's interior with Donbass and Crimea. When the power vanished, signaling and control systems shut down. Trains carrying soldiers, fuel, and ammunition were stranded. For the price of a few rockets and drones, Ukraine had derailed tens of thousands of tons of cargo and thousands of troops. The true genius of the operation lay in its layered deception. By sacrificing an initial HIMARS salvo, Ukraine forced Russia to waste interceptors and expose its crown jewel defenses. By flooding the skies with drones, it pulled panzers and Tors away from the real battle. When the decisive strike came, Russia's most advanced systems were blinded, overloaded, or simply too late. This was modern warfare at its most creative. Brains over brute force, deception over attrition. And its impact went far beyond Belgorod. Russia now faced an impossible choice: protect its frontline troops or its rear infrastructure. It could no longer do both. To defend Belgorod, it would have to pull air defenses away from Ukraine. To protect its troops, it would have to leave its cities exposed. Either way, Ukraine gained an edge. The Belgorod strike entered history not just as a dramatic explosion, but as a shift in the logic of the war. It forced Russia to rethink its entire defensive posture. It demonstrated that power grids, railways, and command centers were just as critical as tanks and trenches. It reminded the world that in the 21st century, wars are not only fought with armies on battlefields, but with electricity, data, and deception deep in the enemy's rear. For Ukraine, it was proof of ingenuity and resilience. With limited resources, it used precision and creativity to turn Russia's own strengths against it. For Russia, it was a humiliation. The night when a superpower was blinded and paralyzed by a handful of rockets that slipped through under the cover of chaos. And for the wider world, it was a warning. The rules of modern war have changed forever.